So here we are. It's October, what are we now, October 11? We're in section 03B, stability. The last slide we were looking at was this one right here. And we talked about center of gravity versus center of pressure versus tail down force during engine power changes. All right, great. So now I'm going to talk about lateral stability. What if you have a center of gravity that's way forward? So for fun, we'll just say, hey, what does this mean, center of gravity way forward? So here's our nifty keen airplane. One of these days, I'm going to learn how to draw an airplane better. And let's put our airfoil on it. And we'll say, here's our center of lift, which is the same as the center of pressure. And just in front of that is going to be our center of gravity. So there's our CG. So the question is, what if the center of gravity is farther forward than normal? So let's see. Look, I brought my questions today. So what I want you to do is think about this problem right here. You're flying along at feet above ground level. So in the central San Joaquin Valley, you're probably at about 20 feet MSL on the altimeter. And you have it trimmed for straight and level flight. The engine is leaned out. You're eating your peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Does anybody want to eat a sandwich other than peanut butter and jelly? Who prefers both? Ham sandwich. Okay. You're eating your ham sandwich, which that's spelled S-A-M-W-I-C-H. Ham sandwich. Oh, there's no W. It's just S-A-M-I-C-H. There's an apostrophe in there, right? Because you got rid of the H. So you're eating your ham sandwich, and everything's trimmed out, and you take your compartment. Or cassette player on your really loud. That was before the days of telephones that had played music and earplugs in and headphones. They'd walk down the street dancing to dancing music while they were walking. Anybody ever done that? Okay, all of you've done that. Okay, great. All right, so you pick up your 20-pound boom box and you lift it up and you sit it on the instrument panel in front of you, and you turn it on and turn up the radio. You moved the center of gravity of this airplane to farther forward compared to where it was. I could have said you got in the back of the baggage compartment behind the seat and grabbed a 20-pound lead weight and stuck it up on the instrument panel. In either case, the average weight of the airplane moved forward from where it was. So in this case right here, we're essentially saying that we moved the center of gravity over to here. Because if here's the cabin and here's this 10-pound boom box, we moved the boom box over to here. So our center of gravity moved forward, or shifted forward. So now the airplane has a center of gravity. Remember, the condition of the airplane, it was trimmed. We were eating our ham sandwich. So we take a bite and we're chewing on it. We grab our boom box, stick it out in front of us, and turn it on. We start rocking out. Well, actually, I'm thinking Kool and the Gang would be pretty awesome. Does anybody know who Kool and the Gang is? This is before they turned the phrase hip hop. It was like rhythm and blues, maybe kind of disco-y. All right, you don't know who Kool and the Gang is. Fine, see if I care. So if you move the center of gravity forward and you don't touch any of the controls because you're all trimmed out. So think about it. Don't say it out loud until I call your name. What's going to happen to the pitch of the airplane? You get three choices. The pitch stays the same. The nose pitches down a little tiny bit, or the nose pitches up a little tiny bit. It's down. That's right. So what do you think happened to the airspeed, Mauricio, in this if the nose pitches down and you don't touch anything? You got three choices. It'll go faster, it'll go slower, or it'll stay the same. How about you, Jordan? What do you think is going to happen to the airspeed, Jordan? Yeah, the airspeed's going to increase. Okay, so let's try it. So don't answer it out loud until I call your name. What's going to happen to your altitude above sea level? It's going to change. The nose is pointed down, your airspeed's increasing, you're going to get lower. Yeah, that's great. So, yes, excellent. So, okay, fine. So you could retrim it to level it off, and then you get tired, you're done with your sandwich, you're going to come in and land, you pick up your 20-pound boombox, and you put it back where it was. Guess what's going to happen now? Everything's going to be opposite. The center of gravity is going to move back from where you trimmed it. The nose is going to pitch up a little bit, you're going to slow down a little bit, and you're going to start climbing. Now, literally, in little tiny training airplanes, you can actually get it really nice and trim, and then actually lean forward and get a 50 or 100 feet per minute descent. I've done that. It's like I get it all trimmed up, and then I start filling my stuff in the glove compartment because, you know, I need, my hands are cold, so that's where the gloves, where I keep the gloves in my airplane, is in the glove compartment. Yes, okay, all right. So, at some point, let's just say for fun, we've moved the center of gravity forward, and the nose is pitching down. And remember, we've got this horizontal stabilizer back here, and then we've got this rudder, or correction, this elevator. And I drew my picture really bad. I didn't do it quite the way I wanted. Let's see if I can fix it. Oops. There we go, a little shorter airplane. And so here's our elevator at the top of the airplane, at the top of the tail. And then we have this elevator. But on the elevator is also the trim tab. So here is the horizontal stabilizer. And I'm going to call it the horizontal stab. And then here is, and it pivots, here is the elevator. And then here is the trim tab. And we've looked at them before, and maybe that's what we'll do the last 2 minutes of class. We'll go out and look at a trim tab. But when you move that trim wheel in the airplane, or in your case, you move that trim wheel in the simulator, all you're doing is moving the trim wheel to push the elevator to where you want. So in this case, if the nose went forward, you would want the elevator to go up a little bit. So you would actually move the trim to go down like that, so that the air would hit the trim tab and push, oh, why did that do that? And push the elevator up. So yay, that worked out great. What if you secretly stowed a human being in the back that weighed 100 pounds and you tried to put that on top of the instrument panel? It would push the nose down even more. Well, here comes the fun part. What happens when you go far forward that you run out of trim, and now you're even pulling on the control wheel, and even though you pull the control wheel all the way back, it's still going down. Well, how much fun is this going to be when you're trying to land? I mean, it's fun as you're going towards the airport. Pull the airplane off, and you need to pull the nose up a little bit and flare, so you're going to be a little bit unhappy. So one of the biggest things about having a center of gravity that's too far forward is that you're not going to be happy when you come in and land. The three minor things about having a forward CG is that, one, it makes it stable. The airplane actually won't change the pitching up and down as easily as it would compared if the center of gravity was aft. So the airplane's a little more stable, and it'll hold altitude a little bit easier while you're eating your sandwich. Your ham sandwich. However, it will take a little bit longer takeoff roll, and the airplane will stall at a slightly higher speed, but 2, 3, 4 knots, you're probably not going to notice that. If your airplane will get off the ground in 800 feet and you have a 3,000 foot long runway, and that 800 to 1,000 feet, you're not even going to notice that either. You probably won't even notice that it's more stable in pitch. Well, the thing is, though, and this is the one that's important, is that if your forward CG is too far forward, then you won't be able to flare the airplane during landing. You might be able to level it off, but what happens to the effectiveness of the elevator when you're flying slower and slower and slower and you're coming into land? Instead of doing 90 knots, you're doing 70 knots. You put all the flaps in, and now you're actually landing, and the airplane slows down to 60 knots. What happens to how well that elevator works? Alex isn't here. Jordan, man, it's your day again. That's awesome. If there's less air blowing across the elevator, does it work? If you normally the elevator makes the nose go up, but now you're flying slower. It doesn't. That's correct. Okay. So what you're coming into land, if you end up pulling the control wheel all the way back, you might just end up plowing straight into the runway and damaging the airplane. So that's why we don't like center of gravity. That's too far forward. So this is definitely, of all these things, this is definitely the most important one about having a forward CG if it gets too far. All right, so now let's talk about an aft CG. Aft is like the CG moving to the back of the airplane. So I don't know if I used the term aft yet. Forward is in the front, and aft means it moves towards the back. Has anybody ever sailed on a ship? Oh, yeah? Okay, right. Is the back the aft, or is that the stern? All right, let's not worry about it too much. The opposite's going to happen. If your center of gravity is aft of what it normally is, the airplane's going to be a little bit more unstable in pitch. Here's the really bad part. One of the really bad parts is if you're going to stall the airplane, if the airplane's going to stall and the tail is really heavy, that's going to be hard for the nose to get pushed down. So you're flying along. Let's say you take off, and instead of bringing one 20-pound boom box, you're taking all the boom boxes that you bought at the Goodwill, at the shop, and you have 10 of these boom boxes in the back of your little Tomahawk. So there's 200 pounds back there, and it's making the tail really, really heavy. So which way is the nose going to go if the tail is getting pushed down by all that weight? This is a tough one. Anybody? Yeah, so the nose is going to go up. So now you're going to be trying to push forward. Well, what if you push forward and forward and forward, and you push the wheel all the way, and the nose still won't go down? Yeah, this is really, so I'm telling you, I'd rather hit the ground really hard because I couldn't pull the nose up. But if I get off the ground and then the nose keeps going up and I can't make it go down, the nose will go up and you'll end up stalling. So an aft CG is, to me, this is my personal opinion, is worse than a forward CG, because a little bit of instability in pitch, that means I'm going to have to, when I'm eating my ham sandwich, I'm going to have to keep one hand on the control wheel to push it and pull it, because it's less stable in pitch. But what I'm really going to be unhappy is if the nose goes up too high. If I can't push it back down, I'm going to stall and I might die. So this is not the most important one here. The aft CG is by far the most important problem associated if the center of gravity is too far back. So literally what's going to happen, thank goodness we're pilots, and we like to add, subtract, multiply, and divide if we have a calculator in front of us. But other than that, so here's our center of pressure at 1/3 past the leading edge. And we'll just say that this is where the center of gravity is most of the time. But we need to be able to put, at least 2 or 3 boom boxes back there, right? Don't we want to be able to do that? Now, granted, we're probably not going to put them up front by the dashboard very often, but it would be really nice, and say here's our bubble that we're sitting in. It'd be nice that if this is where the center of gravity normally is, it'd be kind of nice if the center of gravity could be a little bit aft of that, and it'd be kind of nice if the center of gravity could be a little farther forward of that. Why is that doing that? Okay. So effectively, what that means is this area right in here is going to be the CG range. And maybe a better way to do it is allowable. For every airplane, there's going to be a center of gravity that you can load the airplane up towards, so it's a little bit nose heavy, and the flight controls will still work well enough. You'll still be able to flare the airplane and do everything you need to. And also you could load the airplane as with an aft center of gravity so that the tail is a little bit heavy, but you're still going to be able to push forward on the control wheel and make the airplane go down in case you have a stall or whatever other maneuver you need to do. So the good news is there are engineers that figure this out in advance, and then somebody at the manufacturing company goes and flies it and makes sure that it works correctly. And all that calculations goes into a chart in the pilot operating handbook. So the center of gravity range allowable is in the pilot operating handbook. And guess what? You have to follow it as the pilot in command, even as a private pilot. That's something you're going to do when you start flying an airplane you've never flown before. You're going to say, okay, here's where the fuel goes, here's where the people goes, here's where my cargo goes. In this case, the cargo is a bunch of 1987 boom boxes. You're going to see, and it's just tables. You don't have to, there is some math, but it's add, subtract, multiply, and divide with the calculator. And don't worry, later in the semester, we're going to actually practice doing it. It's not difficult. You just need to do it 2, 3, 4 times. And, okay, now I know how to do it. And you're going to say, yes, my center farther forward than the front allowable, behind or aft of the aft allowable. That means the control, I can pull it forward and I can pull it back, and the airplane's going to do what I want. All right, I think I'm going to come back to that. Next, I want to talk about some stalls in particular. There's effectively 4 ways to exceed the critical angle of attack on a wing. So remember, that's on a previous day, on a previous slide. What is a stall? A stall is when the critical angle of attack on the wing is exceeded, or you go to greater than the critical angle of attack. Because according to the FAA, when does the wing stall? Whenever you exceed the critical angle of attack. But the airplane, you can be doing different things in the airplane. I mentioned it the other day, power on stalls. You're going to practice this. For takeoff scenarios. Can't write scenarios. So you're going to pretend you're in the takeoff configuration. And typically takeoff configuration means 2 things. It's going to be full engine power, and the flaps are going to be up or retracted. And I'm not going to worry about the landing gear. Training airplanes, you're not going to have the landing gear going up. You don't have to write this down, but if it was in an airplane that had retractable landing gear, you put the landing gear up. Power off stalls, you practice those for approach to landing. And that's going to be low or idle power. And you're going to have flaps extended. And that's what you would be if you're coming into land. Let's say, for instance, you're 300 or 400 feet off the ground. You've turned from base leg to final. You're looking straight at the runway. You're 300 feet off the ground. Usually by that point, you've got all the flaps extended, and you've got the power setting is either at idle or it's close to idle. And both of these situations, right after takeoff and just before when you're the closest to the ground, and that's where doing on purpose, stalls are the most, it's the time you want to do them the least. Because if you do have a stall, and let's say you practice stalls and you get good at it, but let's just say it takes 200 feet to recover. What if you stall the airplane at 199 feet? By the time you recover, you're going to second story. You're not going to recover in time to not hit the ground or the power lines or whatever it is. So that's one of so you're going to practice those stalls. You're also going to practice an accelerated stall. An accelerated stall is high wing loading. Effectively, that means steep turns. Now, let's just say turns. Now, granted, maybe when you're doing a 30-degree bank turn, you only need 110% of your lift on the wings, so 100 of it to keep the airplane up and 10% to make your turn. But now it's going to be easier to hit the critical angle of attack because you're already trying to maintain altitude. You're already at a slightly higher angle of attack. And so I know it'll be difficult to answer this question, so I'm probably going to give you the answer is, what kind of bank angle do you use flying in the traffic pattern in light airplanes? How much do you roll the airplane? About. It's not a law, but that's what people practice at. It works out really well. So you bank the airplane to 30 degrees of bank, and here's where people screw up. In particular, this accelerated cross control stall. The place people usually do it is in the traffic pattern at less than 1,000 feet. That last turn, or the second to the last turn to the final approach, you're under 1,000 feet, and you're turning at 30 degrees, and you make a mistake and you pull back too much on the control wheel, and you stall the airplane. And just to be really clear, I'm not trying to tell you to scare you. I'm telling you this because you're going to have to practice it to get your pilot certificate. You're going to have to demonstrate it on your check ride, on your driving test. And the more you know as a pilot, the safer you're going to be. I have never inadvertently stalled an airplane in my entire life. But I have practiced doing stalls. Probably, if I the student, I've probably practiced 1,000 stalls. And the other great thing, which I have to tell in advance the airplane's going to stall. Number one, all little airplanes have, let me rephrase that, 99.99% of the airplanes out there, and the little tiny percent that isn't, they're the ones that were built in the 30s and 40s and into the 50s. But if you fly anything built in the late 1950s or later, it has a stall warning horn. It makes noise. And it comes on 5 or 10 knots before you stall. So if you hear that noise, you look at your airspeed and you go, and you push the nose down so you don't stall. You don't actually have but. And then secondly, you're actually going to practice a thing called slow flight. Slow flight is where you pretend you're on takeoff, like leave the power on, and you deliberately slow the airplane down. You're not going to stall it, but you practice flying the airplane. Granted, we normally climb the airplane at 70 knots, and if the engine power is on, you're not going to stall at the bottom end of the green arc. You're going to stall another 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 knots slower than that. So you actually go to the bottom of the green arc, and you try flying the airplane around, and you see what happens. There's several things that happen. You got to push more on the right pedal to go straight, and good. So you actually have to turn the control wheel more than you normally do. And a lot of little airplanes, just before the wing is disturbed, friction out there on the wing through the airframe, and you can feel it. Also, the sound gets weaker. There's not 70 knots. That's probably about 80 miles an hour. There's not 80 miles an hour wind noise going past the airplane. 80 miles an hour, turn off the radio. Leave the windows up, but turn off the radio. There's some road noise, but in some cars, especially if they're aerodynamic, you can hear the wind noise. You can hear the wind. So there's going to be a lot of indications. In fact, I think it's the next slide. A lot of indications about prior to the stall actually occurring. So you don't actually have to go, oh gosh, I might stall the airplane and die, so I never want to fly an airplane. I submit, no. Can anybody? You're going to learn how to notice if a stall is occurring, and you're going to learn how to fly, what to do if it does occur, and then you're never going to inadvertently stall the airplane for your entire life. How many people inadvertently have been driving down a 2-lane road and inadvertently, completely by accident, got the entire car over onto the other lane in front of an 18-wheeler? And then went, oh, I think I'm in the wrong lane. That was a terrible idea. And then you have to get the entire car back to where it was. Has anybody ever done the entire car over there? Probably not. I've never done that inadvertently. Okay. So that's how much you have to worry about it. All right. So if an accelerated stall, when you have high wing loading, remember we talked about 1G if you're straight and level. If you go to 2Gs, it's 2G. If you go to 60 degrees of bank and you're holding altitude, it's 2Gs. That's a wing loading of 2Gs. That's a high wing loading for a little airplane. But even at 30 degrees, 0.1, or something like that. So what that means, turn, it's easier to exceed the critical angle of attack. And are you making 30-degree bank turns while you're flying around the airport and you're under 1,000 feet? Yeah, you are. So are you going to practice? Oh, yes, you are. And then the last one, a cross control stall, is, I think, the most interesting one of these three. The cross control stall. Let's look at an airplane when you go to make this turn. There are two flight controls you operate. You operate the ailerons and you operate the rudder. The ailerons do most of the turning, but if you don't push the aileron in, the turn isn't very good. If you look at your 6 basic instruments, your 6-pack, this one right here, there's a little glass tube in here, and there's a little black ball in there. And you may not recall from one of the simulator lessons, that ball needs to stay centered, and the way, if it is in the center, you, quote, step on the ball with your rudder pedals to bring that in. So if the ball's sticking out to the right, you step on it with your right foot. It's because you don't have enough right rudder. So if you go turn to the left, you give it aileron, but you also give it rudder in the same direction. If you're giving it the wrong amount of rudder, and that ball especially is way off to the side, when you stall, let's just say for fun that you're in a left turn. So we're in a left turn, and we don't give it any rudder. We'll make it even worse. We'll say that we're giving it right rudder, and we give it right rudder. That means the wings are going to try to make the airplane go to the left, but with the air hitting the rudder and bouncing off, it's going to push the tail to the left, and the nose, our yaw, is going to be to the right. So this is a cross-control stall, is when this little ball in the turn and slip indicator, if it's way over here, of course in this example I guess I needed to have drawn it way over there, but if the ball is not in the center, in particular if it's way off to one side and you're trying to turn in the other direction, and you pull the nose up too much, you're going to stall. But something interesting is going to happen that it hasn't before, is that if you're yawing the airplane to the right, then this means this wing is going to be going a little bit faster, and this wing is going to be going a little bit slower. So just for fun, think about this question before I call who's going to answer it. If you had to pick and say, these two wings is gonna stall first, which one would stall first? Jordan, I'm just kidding, it's Jared. I'm taking your name out for a couple of minutes, Jordan. I don't understand why. Oh, it's because of those 2 bumps I put on it, and I feel it, and I go, oh yeah, that's the one I'm just kidding. Brandon. So which one of these 2 wings do you think is going to stall first? The one that's going faster, or the one that's... Yes, the right wing, that's correct. Yeah, it's because the wing is going slower. Yeah, so which one of these 2 wings is generating more lift? Rodrigo. Which of these 2 wings is going to get more lift? Left one, that's correct. Do you know why? Because it's going faster, and faster airflow is one of the things that impacts lift. So here's a fun thought. This airplane stalls, and the nose pitches down, and one wing... If one wing... I'm going to get a new container. Mauricio. It's jinxed. You and Jordan. So Mauricio. So of these two wings, which one is getting more lift? The left one. So talk about roll. Thanks. If you talk about roll, which way is it going to roll? Is it going to not roll at all? Is the one wing going to go up, or is the opposite wing going to go up? It's going to go up. You're right. It's going to roll. So now here's which of those two wings is going to go up? The one that's faster because it has more lift. Yeah, that's excellent. So cross-controlling any nose drops, and one wing, the other wing goes down. It starts to get really interesting really, really fast. This is one really good way to... I don't know if we're going to get to a... We won't get to a spin, I don't think. But a spin is an S. You have to... You push the rudder pedal all the way in. Actually bring it up and stall it. And right as you shove one of the rudder pedals, one wing goes faster, one wing goes slower, and that wing with more lift, it gets more lift, and it kind of goes over your head. You kind of go, whoop. But you, in order to stay in that spin, you actually have to hold the rudder pedal in, and you have to hold the wheel back. That's what's nice, positive, especially for training. If you just let go of everything, it'll recover. Except might take 500 or 800 for a spin at 400 feet above the ground. So you don't want to enter a spin when you're coming to land or right after you. What people do is they're making one of those last two turns in the traffic pattern before they land, and they realize, oh, I needed to turn a little sharper, and they push the rudder pedal in. And they also don't pay enough attention, and they pull the nose back. Uncoordinated turn, and they stall the airplane in. Uncoordinated means that you don't have the correct amount of rudder in. Cross-controlled stall is when you don't have the correct amount of rudder in, and you stall the airplane. Then that's the most likely time for you to enter a spin. So I can guarantee you, so here's what's really good news. I can guarantee you, when you're learning how to fly and you don't know what you're doing, I think the instructor is paying very close attention to that little black ball over there flying around in the traffic pattern? Yeah, they are. You think they're paying close attention to your airspeed? Oh, yeah, they are. And when I first people how to land planes, I'm holding onto the control wheel so they can't get silly and do something really, really silly. And I have a nice little talk and say, if I start talking to you or I say I'm helping you, don't push against the wheel when I'm trying to pull on it. Or I'll say, I have the controls, and that means you need to let go. The nice car where you're the driving. Ever taught somebody else to drive? I taught people to drive in a car that didn't even have a brake pedal on my side. That becomes really fun. Go ridiculous, man. I want a whole set of controls. I want the accelerator pedal, and I want the brake, and I want the steering wheel. And if I was going to have a professional driving school, I would modify a car and do that. Okay, so a cross-control stall. Yes? How do you roll a helicopter? The same way you do in an airplane is you take the stick or the control wheel and push it hard to the right or hard to the left. The problem is most helicopters, you will break it while you're doing that maneuver. And when I say break it, so you'll die. Now you watch on TV, you see the Red Bull helicopter pilot. He's got one trick helicopter, number one. Number two, they replace the rotor blades really frequently. And number three, he's been doing this for decades, and he knows exactly how to do it without dying. You don't know how to do that. Illegal. It's the same for helicopters. You can't go past a 60-degree bank, and you can't go past 30 degrees up or down nose pitch, otherwise you're doing aerobatics. And there are 0 helicopters that are certified for aerobatics. So it is not against the law for you to even try to do that. And if you want to live, don't try it. Question? They would wait until after you were on the ground and you were dead, and then they would figure it out. Oh, how would they know if for some reason you got the Red Bull helicopter guy? Well, in an airplane, you can do it in an airplane a lot easier without killing yourself. They may not find out, but there are people that have done aerobatic maneuvers in little airplanes that they rented, and they bent them. And then the next people came out to do a pre-flight, and they go, wow, the wing's bent. And then they take that person that they think did it, and they put him in a closed room, and they waterboard him until they confess. I'm just kidding. You can't waterboard people, U.S. citizens inside the 50 states. That's against the law. It's only okay to waterboard foreign nationals when we hold them prisoner outside of the United States. Then it's not illegal according to the laws of the United States. All right, stall recognition. So I talked about stall recognition. I got ahead of myself. So how do you tell that you're going to stall so you can prevent it? Yay, that's what we want to do. How do you drive down the road and not hit that 18-wheeler coming down the other lane? How do you stall? 18-wheeler head-on collision recognition. First, look at the middle, the double lines or the dotted line in the middle, and make sure you're on the right-hand side. Unless you're in a foreign country that drives on the wrong side of the road, and then make sure you're on the left-hand side of the road. Right? Number 2, look out there and make sure the truck's not in your lane. Right? So there's ways to recognize imminent head-on collision. So just for fun, what would you do if an 18-wheeler was coming along and you look up and you're in the right spot in your lane and you look up and they're about 10 feet into your lane? What do you do? Yeah, I agree with you. I would slam on the brakes. But what if that didn't seem to be doing enough? What else could you do? Get off the road. Yeah, it's time for the shoulder. I'd rather hit a head. I'd almost rather hit than hit an 18-wheeler. I'm not sure which one I would like more. Both. Well, either way, your car's going to stop. Okay, if I hit the corner of the 18-wheeler, I might spin around and it might take me an extra second to slow down. But I'm telling you, the shoulder of the road looks really, really good right now. In the United States, people, when you're driving, pretty much the only thing we get taught to do is if something bad happens, you slam on the brakes. We don't practice very much. What if that's not enough? What if that's not enough? What if you pull out in an intersection, you start out at 0 and the green light comes on and you start accelerating and you look and you see that there's a car coming and it looks like they're going really fast and they're not going to stop by the time they get to the intersection. We teach people to slam on the brakes when something bad happens, but in that case, it might be better to just push the throttle down as fast as you can to get out of their way. I thought about this because this happened to me once, and I was lucky. I put the brakes on section. Because being a trained driver in the United States, what do you do when something bad happens? You go, as you're slamming on the brakes, right? So I did those 2 steps correctly. Except I really should have not hit the brakes. Question. Uh-huh. Yeah. Right. So. Right. So in that case, braking probably wouldn't have done. You'd have still had a collision. You had to actually get it right. So I think what we need are automobile simulators to train for these unusual situations. But that's outside of the scope of this course. So let's talk about signs of a stall in an aircraft. Well, first of all, when I say mushy controls, that means you move it the same amount you normally do, but the airplane doesn't roll or pitch or yaw the way you think it should. You actually have to move the controls more than normal to get the airplane to do what you want it to do. And at night, the first 5 lessons you take, the first 10 lessons you take, you won't be able to notice. But after a while, you're going to go, hey, when I turn the wheel, this is what the airplane usually does. I turn the wheel, and the airplane's just barely doing it. What's up with that? And you're going to go, oh, I know how this feels. This is when I'm practicing slow flight. So that's another good reason to practice slow flight. Slow flight practice is when you don't stall the airplane, but you deliberately fly it around. Really, literally only 5 knots above the stall, and you go, wow, this is what it feels like, so next time I feel this, I'm going to go, ah, and push the button at half the power. Step 1, 2, 3. We'll do them simultaneously. Say ah, or I mean ah. So that's what mushy control is. So this is really the same thing. You're going to feel mushy controls, and I can't spell loss. L-O-S-S, there's a missing S. That's not Los Angeles. Loss, L-O-S-S. The controls are feeling mushy, and they are now because they don't have any impact. If you're in a fixed pitch propeller, that is the propeller change pitch, remember you're stuck in third gear like you would be in a Piper Tomahawk or almost any airplane that you're likely to take flying lessons in, because normally you take lessons in one of the least expensive airplanes you can find. The blade pitch is going to slow down. Think about this. If you're in a car that's stuck in third gear and you're going 60 miles an hour and you start holding on the pedal, but you don't move your foot. You don't have the cruise control on, but you've got the pedal pushed down halfway. You're going 60 miles an hour, and you start going up a hill, you're going to slow down. What's going to happen to engine RPM? Engine RPM is going to go down too. So it's the same thing in a fixed pitch propeller. If you slow down by pulling the nose up and going slower, the engine RPMs are going to get lower, and the engine's going to make less noise and a little bit less vibration. And like I talked about earlier, there's going to be less wind noise going across the airplane. Invariably, if you're renting an airplane that's 20 years old, and let's put it this way, airplanes you train and fly are inexpensive. Automobiles don't seal that well against the outside wind, so the seals, even if they were brand new out of the factory, don't seal that nearly as good as a brand new car. 2004, yeah, it's a 2004 Toyota Prius, and it's got like 2 rubber seals around the door, and I'm like going, what's going on? Man, and that thing, you shut the door and you can't hear that much outside. But just pretend, take your car and take off half the seals on the doors, and now you know what it sounds like for air noise in an airplane. So you're going to notice less noise from the air. And I already talked about the vibration. Literally, the airplanes generally are designed so that the wing close to the airframe, close to the fuselage, stalls first. That way the airflow going across the aileron is still working, so the ailerons still work. In any case, when that air starts to burble or is disturbed across the top of the wing, it's going to pound on the aluminum of the wing a little bit. It's going to cause vibration. You're going to feel it. You probably won't be able to hear it. So buffeting and vibration. Buffeting is you're pulling the nose up to stall, and the nose just goes up and down, just a little tiny bit, back and forth and back and forth. And you're going, what's going on? Oh, this is what stalls. And then as it's stalling, the airplane's going to pitch. So your instructor is going to give you the technique that works for that particular airplane. But generally speaking, the instructor is going to say, let's go all the way up to a stall and recognize it and recover before it stalls. But on your track ride, the examiner is going to say, let's do a full-blown stall, and then I want you to recover before it stalls. Because you really need those 2 skill sets. How do I recognize it, and then don't let it happen? How do I recognize it, and how does it happen, and then what do I do about it? So there's the stall recovery. You're going to reduce the angle of attack on the wing. Generally, that means you're going to push forward on the control wheel. You're going to push forward on the control wheel. If the engine is not already at full power, you're going to smoothly advance the throttle all the way to full power, because you want to practice as if you're in the worst case scenario. Where's the worst place in a little airplane, or a big airplane for that matter, where's the worst place to stall the wing? When you're turning, yeah, when you're turning at 20,000 feet. What? You're landing or you're taking off. I would have said low to the ground, but those are the 2 circumstances. You're going to be low to the ground. So yes, so let's practice the technique. If it happens, and we're in the worst place possible for it to happen, and that's what we're going to try to recover with the least amount of loss of altitude. Let's recover with 200 feet of altitude and not lose 400 feet. So you're going to apply full power, and by this time, if you've reduced the pitch on the wings and you've added full power, you'll have broken the stall, the wing will be flying, and now you can pull the nose back up, and you're going to pull it back up to a climbing airspeed, normal climb, something like 70 miles, 70 knots. So I want to watch this. Question, Jonathan? No, stall recovery in helicopters doesn't exist. You just die. You never stall the rotor blades on a helicopter, lest ye shall surely die. The blades will stall, and then they'll slow down, and there's no way to speed them back up. In an airplane, you can look a couple of 100 feet and get the wing flying. In the helicopter, though, you're not looking at airspeed, you're looking at the RPM of the rotor blades. So the RPM gauge has a lower RPM. Thou shalt never go below that lower RPM, lest ye shall surely die. You can quote me on that. Yeah, the blades. Right, yeah. If that angle of attack goes too high and it stalls, the drag has gone way up and the blades slow down. And even if you immediately go to zero pitch, you can't bring them back up to speed because now you're falling down and the angle of it is way too high. In a helicopter, but in helicopters they don't talk about stalling. They talk about blade stall, and that's related to rotor RPM. So in a helicopter, the most important thing you can ever look at in a helicopter is the rotor RPM gauge. That's why it's the biggest one, and it's right smack in front of it. And it's got a green arc, and it's got a lower red. If you go past the upper red line, now you damage the helicopter you're going to land, and they'll probably have to replace parts to the tune of tens of thousands of dollars, but you'll be alive. But if you go below, yeah. See, question? So an engine quits in a helicopter, you push the collective down, that's the stick in your left hand. You push it down, and that takes the blades to a really low pitch, and now you go into a glide. It's called auto rotation. The blades will spin around automatically. You're trading your energy of being high for energy to make the rotor blades spin, and you practice that all the time. Just like in an airplane, you practice engine failure. In helicopters, you practice engine failure. It's just the technique is different. And in helicopters, when you push that thing down, you also have to pull the stick back a little so the wind will blow through the rotor blades. So it's completely different than airplanes. So I would suggest if you learn how to fly airplanes first and then you go to helicopters, while you're learning, because in airplanes you push the nose forward. Second. In a helicopter where the rotor blades don't weigh very much, so they don't have much inertia, you got 1 or 2 seconds to push that thing down. So, guess what you do in flight? So how often do you let go of that stick? Yeah, so in the helicopters that we flew at the place I flew, they didn't have hydraulic systems on them. If you let go of there's no trim on it. If you let go of the stick and you're down left, it just flops over, and then the helicopter flops over. So you can't ever let go of that under any circumstance whatsoever. The collective that controls the pitch of the blade, you can let go and change the radio frequency, and then you put your hand back on it. So if you can get eating a ham sandwich in flight, helicopters don't eat in flight. They don't drink in flight because they got to keep one hand on both each of the sticks. The collective you can let go for a second or two, and the entire time you're doing that, you're going, this feels weird. Trained that way. So I'm not trying to convince you not to be a helicopter pilot. I mean, I worked at a helicopter flight school for 8 years. I think it's awesome flying helicopters. It's sweet. It's been several years. 2-seaters are $300 an hour plus the instructor. Whatever it is for an airplane, just multiply by 2.5, and that's how much it costs. At least times 2. Why? Because in airplanes, the propeller on a little tiny airplane, it never goes bad. a rotor blade on helicopters, they vibrate a lot, so every 2,000, depends on the helicopter, but the ones we flew, every 2,200 hours you had to throw the rotor blades away and get new ones. So you have to spread out that cost across all the previous 22. One for, and there's one for the tail rotor. So you got to take that cost. Helicopter, it's about $150,000 to overhaul everything every 2,200 hours. So that's $75 an hour just for the extra cost of all this overhauling. So then, more expensive because helicopters, in a little airplane, if you land a little airplane and the wingtip hits the ground and it bangs it up, $5,000 and nobody. And these helicopters, little two-seaters, rotor blade around, and you're not hurt. You totaled the helicopter. Now it's $250,000. So insurance rates are much, much, much higher. So you got to charge that to your student. And they burn, I won't say, they burn about 50% more fuel for the same weight. So if you're flying a little two-seater like a Tomahawk and it burns 6 gallons an hour, actually the little two-seaters we flew, they burn 10 gallons an hour. It's almost twice as much. So there's another $15, $20. Yeah. You're flying to a different location. Are there maps? Yeah, helicopter pilots use the same maps as airplane pilots. They just hold them closer because they're more worried about the terrain and the obstacles. If you're an airplane driving, you get up to 10,000 feet and the engine quits, you got quite a few minutes before you have to figure out where the power lines are, right? If you're flying a helicopter at descent 500 feet per minute. Oh wait, sorry, that helicopter descends at about 1,000 feet per minute. If you're at 500 feet, you got about 30 seconds till you're on the ground. If you're in a helicopter and you're flying along at 500 feet, the engine quits, you can turn right about 45 degrees and left about 45 degrees, but pretty much you're going to land right smack in front of you if you're at 500 feet. You get up to 1,000 feet, if there's something below you and the engine quits, you fly out for about 15 seconds and turn around. The glide ratio was 4-to-1 instead of 10-to-1. Pretty steep. The little helicopters we were training in, it was about 1,000 feet per minute. But you don't need any length of road or field. It needs to be a little bit bigger than the diameter of your. No, if you do it correctly, you're going to touch down, and you'll go woo, and you'll pass out when you wake up. You know, I mean, you'll faint from joy. I'm just kidding. I've never known any pilot to do that. You practice it just like you do in airplanes. In helicopters, you practice it all the time. Are there more errors? Yes, but that's no. I take that back. I'm gonna stop recording here. There are not more errors.